Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to session 3 of the RPSC PHSC Joint Symposium on Postal History. This is the advanced track, and we're very happy to have Dr. Joel Weiner with us today. And Joel will be presenting on the postmarks of Jerusalem during the British period. Joel was born in Montreal and has been collecting stamps since he was 9 years old. His diverse collecting interests extend from the Canadian centennial issue to Palestine mandate stamps and postal history, and all aspects of Great Britain stamps and cancels. He's a fellow of the RPSC, a life member of the Edmonton Stamp Club, the Society of Israel Philatelists, and the American Philatelic Society, as well as a member of many other philatelic organizations, including BNAPS, PHSC, AAPE, PSSC, and the Great Britain Philatelic Society. He has exhibited extensively in Canada, the United States, and Great Britain with several gold medal, multi-frame, and single-frame exhibits. He compiled the Canadian Inkjet Catalog published by BNAPS, and he was a Commissioner General for CAPEX 22 and has been a national level RPSC judge for nearly 30 years and judged at shows in Canada, the US, and Australia. Joel is the first Vice President of the Society of Israel Philatelists and chairs the RPSC Committee on Judging and Exhibiting. He's married to Linda. They have 2 grown sons and 2 grandsons. He's a retired biochemist and distinguished university professor emeritus at the University of Alberta and a fellow of the Royal Philatelic Society of Canada. So Joel, welcome and thank you so much for being here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, Greg. Let me just see if I can share my screen. Share. And now I want to get to full screen. Do you see it all now?
Yes, that's fine. That's perfect.
Okay. Can I get rid of the pictures of the participants?
So yeah, if you go to the upper right-hand corner.
Yeah, got it. Okay, thanks. All right, so I want to thank the RPSC and PHSC for the opportunity to present this talk. I'm going to give you a short outline. I'm going to talk about the military and occupied enemy territory administration post office from 1917 to 1920, the earliest part of the British occupation of Palestine, the World War I. Talk about the civil administration and the mandate from 1920 to 1948. Talk about the sub-post offices. I'm pretty sure I won't get to the other forms of communication that were under the control of the General Post Office, like everything from car licenses to telegrams to money orders to banking, etc. If you have any questions, you can always contact me by email. So this area of postal history is a Markoffli exhibit. That is, it's a postmark exhibit. It's an aspect of postal history. It's been researched extensively over the years, way back in the 1980s by Michael Sacker, and who was one of the greatest Palestine collectors of the 20th century, and Emanuel Glassman. And then Michael Sacker wrote a really huge, wonderful book on Mandate Palestine in 1995. And then Glassman wrote, after Michael passed away, Glassman wrote an update of the Jerusalem Council catalog in 2002. And by this time, I'd been collecting it for quite a while. And a lot of the pictures, the covers in that book are from this collection. So we begin in December 17, 1918, when General Allenby led the British forces into Jerusalem. This famous photo here of him coming through the Jaffa Gate, walking rather than riding a horse in order to really indicate his respect for the city of Jerusalem. So when he entered Jerusalem, things were in a mess. The Ottoman Turks had occupied Palestine. they left in disarray during the First World War battles, and I have another exhibit on this, which because it's a really fascinating story. So one of the first things they had to do was reinstall a postal system because this was the major way of communication, obviously at the time. And so the Army Post Office in Jerusalem has it's called SZ44, S for different meanings, probably Southern, Z for linked to post office, base post office Z, and 44, which is the number assigned to Jerusalem. So they didn't have any stamps. And so for a period from December 17th, 1917 to early February 1919, mail could be sent by civilians post-free. And very, very few letters were actually sent. And this mail is called the first interim period of Palestine. And it's the mail is very rare and unfortunately very expensive. And so this is a cover was sent to St. Gallen in Switzerland. Switzerland did not accept mail free. There's a postage due here of 20 centimes. But most countries did accept it, post free during this short period before the first stamps of Palestine were available. Mail. This is as you can see here, is a SZ44 cancel from 21st of December 1917. It's a skeleton cancel with the date in a single line, as you can see there. Now, in February, they issued some stamps which were printed in Egypt. Because of the importance of Palestine and the historical significance, the British didn't want to use overprinted stamps as they did in a number of other places that they occupied during the First World War. And so the first stamp here was this 1 piaster, which was the rate for foreign mail. And this came out in February. And so that first interim period ended. And then shortly after, they came out with they reduced the color, made it much lighter blue, so they could overprint it 5 milliamps, which was the internal rate. And this is Palestine number 2. It's a rather rare stamp. It's only was used for a few days, and before they came out with this number 4, which is a different printing. We don't have time to get into that, but the study of these lithographed stamps is quite quite interesting. A lot of people specialize in them. This is the post office building in Jerusalem at the time. Now, SZ44 was used by military and was used by civilians. Here again is a number 1, Palestine number 1, censored cover with a passed by censor cachet here. This is a cover going to, I believe, to Cairo, Egypt. And it's, again, the cancel with the date in 1 line. Now, a second cancel was also used in SZ44, which has the date in 2 lines, as you see here. This is a registered postcard. It's got a number of typograph stamps, which replaced the lithographed blues that you saw earlier. This has the date and 2-line cancel here. And then it also has on the validating the registration etiquette, you have a single line SZ44 cancel. This is going to Port Said, and it's rated at 10 milliamps for registration and 5 milliamps for the postage. Now, there was another post office in Jerusalem, SZ2. This was a military post office and was only supposed to be used by the military. But a few letters, civilian letters, were actually canceled. This is one of them, going to Bern in Switzerland. It's got the double circle engraved cancel used at SZ2, and the registration cachet is validated with a double circle Occupied Enemy Territory Administration Egyptian Expeditionary Force cancel, and we'll talk more about those in a moment. This was addressed to the Bureau International de la Paix, which was at the time was a very important organization. It received the Nobel Prize just a couple of years prior to 1919, and it still exists today. It's an interesting destination. There was also a packet cancel, normally used on packets. Here it is canceling a block of 4 of the lithograph stamps on a cover to Amsterdam. Again, we know it says at 44 because the cachet on the registration etiquette is canceled, and as said, 44 skeleton cancel. Now, after these skeleton cancels were used, they then received engraved cancels from Britain. The skeleton cancel were actually made locally, and this is a cover, an early cover, going to Cincinnati in the United States with the double circle OETA EEF Jerusalem. There were actually 2 hammers, one which had a dash between the OETA EEF and the other which had a dot between the OETA and EEF. And this is again a registered cover, canceled with a Palestine. You can see your censorship cachet, and it's got the various markings on the back to the United States, and mainly went through an office called GM1 in Palestine. GM1 was the headquarters of the British, and that's where censorship took place. And so this on the back is a cancel when it entered GM1 for censorship, and another GM1 cancel when it left GM1 on its way to Cincinnati. Now, in addition to those double circle engraved cancels, there was a 1 or more skeleton cancels used in Jerusalem. This is one here. Remember, in a skeleton cancel, the type is removable, cleaned, can be put back in, whereas in the engraved cancel, it's fixed and only the date can be changed. So in these skeleton cancels, that we find a number of variations of the cancel, whether they were different hammers or whether they were just put together differently. We can't really say, but this is one of them. It's a cover to where is it? Can't even read. To London, and it's got these very high value stamps. You see a 20 piaster typograph stamp and a 9 piaster, and we can tell from the inscription at the bottom here, post office, that the recipient, that this was an order for postage stamps sent to Palestine by a stamp dealer in order to get these stamps used, which is about the only way to get them because of the so high values. They were returned on the envelope to the person who purchased them in London. And so this is a registered cover, an OHMS cover from the post office, presumably containing Palestine stamps. Now, there are some variations of these hammers, as you can imagine. So there's one here, the cover on the left has the A in Jerusalem missing. This is fairly common. It was used for a while, and you can see these quite often. The one on the right has the raised L in Jerusalem, and this was only used for a day or two. There's a couple of covers known. It's quite rare. Again, variations of the way the type was replaced when they cleaned the hammer. Here's a couple more variations. You can see here the spacing between OETA, EEF. It can be narrow or wide, and we have here a cover on the left is a cover to I can't even read it now. It's an internal cover to Jaffa, yes, and the one on the right is a registered cover going to England, and it's got a very rare cancel on it. So in addition to the OETA EEF cancel, it has the Jerusalem 1 cancel, and the Jerusalem 1 was the first sub-office opened in Jerusalem by the British. We'll come back to that a little later. The main thing I want to show here is the difference in the way they could space the OETAEF from narrow to wide. And here's another example on a telegram form. It's really quite different. In this case, we have the EEF OET. The A was not included, and so a completely different arrangement of the type in this skeleton cancel. Again, this was used for a few months from November 1919 to January 1920, and it's a scarce variation. This cancel is Jerusalem MO. MO is money order. Shouldn't have been used on mail. It's canceling a very high value 5 piastre stamp going to Cairo, so way above the 2 piastre postage. It's the only known example of this cancel on mail. There's quite a story behind this. I'd seen it in another exhibit back. I've been collecting Jerusalem postal history for 50 years. And about 30 or 40 years ago, I saw this in an exhibit. And it's the only one known. I wondered if I'd ever get it. Well, it turns out the owner got remarried, and his new wife forced him to sell all his stamps in the postal history. So this came on the market. But otherwise, I don't think it would have come on the market. So an interesting story. So that's the very rare Jerusalem MO cancel. Now, after the military administration ended, so on just get my notes here so I don't get the dates wrong. Yeah, so in July 1920, the military turned over administration to a civil administration. And so they used, now that we don't have OETA, Occupied Enemy Territory Administration, we just simply have Jerusalem. So here's single circle cancels, 2 examples, one in which the E is missing. These again are skeleton cancels, one going to Beirut in Syria, because there was no Lebanon at this time, and the other one going to the United States. And these, again, correctly, posted and so forth, what weight, this one has a double weight. The one on the left has a double weight rating. So we have these single circle cancels. Now there's a huge variation of these. There's so many single circle cancels that in order to study them, what Glassman and Sacker did was they created these tracing paper overlays, so you can overlay it on the cancels and see which one you actually have, because they're hard to distinguish one from the other. So this is one way to simply determine which cancel you have, but overall they're pretty darn common. There's just lots of them. Here's a couple more examples. A censored cover going by 1939. So this is going to Europe, to Switzerland. And it's going via Alitalia, the Italian airline, because at this time in 1939, Italy hadn't entered the war yet. And so Alitalia was flying to Palestine from Europe. Again, censored because it's very early in the Second World War. And then on the right, we have another example on a postage due cover to Britain. Now, one of the interesting things about the British is they were really careful about record keeping. So they had these record sheets, and it's actually larger. This is just part of it. It has like 48 squares and used on both sides. And what happens, the clerk took the hammer out in the morning for his job. He had to put it on the record sheet and initial it. And then when he brought it back at night, he had to put an example on the record sheet and again, sign it in. So this one has 2 slightly different hammers, but it's not important. But you can get a lot of information from these. I've written several articles on these record sheets because some of them can tell you quite a bit about how mail was handled in the post office. And this was used probably as a receiving cancel for arrival of mail. Now we have double circle cancels. These are the most common cancels you see from Palestine. Again, there's a large variety of them, and you need these tracing paper overlay sheets to tell exactly which type you have because of the variety. It just makes it so much easier than measuring distances and width of circle and size of type and stuff like that, the font that was used. So this is one of the first double circle cancels. It was, as you can see here, it simply has Jerusalem at the bottom. What they did was they just filed off the OETAEEF so you couldn't see it, and just used this as a postmark. Also on this cover, we have a Krag machine cancel. We'll talk about these a little later. This is another type of cancel. It doesn't have those bars and Maltese cross that you'll see on most double circle cancels. It just has nothing at the bottom. And it's very rare to see it on mail. This is the only example on mail that I know of. It's used as a receiving cancel on a postcard from Russia. It was mainly used on receipts, like this Post and Telegraph receipt for a telegram that you can see here. This is where you mainly find this cancel. Many examples of double circle cancels. Just quickly, here's a cover to incoming cover Jerusalem with postage due. The cancels used to cancel the postage due stamps. Here's an OAT cover, onward air transport. This cachet was put on a bundle of covers that were going to go by email on the top cover. And so, many variations of these double circle cancels with the bars and Maltese cross that you can see here. Now, like the British system, in Palestine, they used triangle cancels for second-class mail. Mail didn't have to have a date. And so there were a number of different triangle cancels used in Jerusalem, mainly at times of very heavy mail, like during Jewish New Year. And one type had JSM for Jerusalem, another had J.M. for Jerusalem. This cover here, the JSM, is used on a cover to California. These were not supposed to be used for external mail outside of Palestine, but here's an example where it was used. And the JM is on a cover to Bnei Barak, a town in Palestine. There were other variations. There's a triangle cancel where the whole Jerusalem is written. And one of them, this one here on the right, is the cancels in red, which is very unusual because red would mean prepaid normally in the British system. So unusual to use it, cancel it in red. Should have been in black. Two different examples of basically second-class mail. This is the only example known of this cancel. It's a mute triangle used to Tel Aviv from Jerusalem. And we know it's Jerusalem because of the address from the sender. And it's, again, paying the correct rate. But we don't know the date because there's no date on this cancel. But we can go on now to the machine cancels. So Krag. The British were very, very heavy users of Krag machine cancels. This was a Norwegian company. It made a continuous head which had two data hubs on a round hub. So as the cover went on continuously, you get two data impressions on the cover. There were two types. One with just the wavy bars, and the other with Palestine inside the wavy bars. This cover on the left is quite an interesting one. It's on the first acceptance of civilian mail to airmail to Iraq. And the RAF had run an airmail service in Palestine to Iraq, but it was only for military mail. But on this date in 1926, they were able to take mail from civilians, and this is one of those first airmail covers. On the left here is just an example of this Krag cancel where they had a hard time deciding how to orient the cover because of where the stamp is placed relative to the business information, and you can see all these different orientations. Here's a Krag cancel. Now the bridge is missing. So in the previous one, you see there was a bridge in the cancel with the data part. Then they removed the bridge, and we have here on a cover that was going to Biarritz. It was forwarded, and so it was charged postage due, but it has the data hub without the bridge. Now we have an interesting council. In August of 1939, they brought in a new crack council, which had the number 1 at the bottom. It had a sort of a bridge, but the Second World War broke out just a few days later. And so they took this council and removed the wavy bars and placed it with Passed by Censored Jerusalem to use on censored mail. Now, for a while, this was thought to be a unique cover. Now that we have eBay, and you can see millions of covers, 2 or 3 more have shown up over the years, actually probably more than that. So what was thought to be unique is no longer unique. This is a cover that was opened, resealed with actually an Edward VIII sealing tape. So they used this in the Senate. It was only used for a few days, and then they got more organized with their censorship. But they didn't put this cancel back into use. Now we have the Universal Machine Cancel. This is from the main supplier of cancels to North America, Universal Frankers, Universal Postal Frankers. I'd say about 75% of the mail you see from Palestine is simply canceled with these this very simple machine cancel. Every year they produced a new cancel with a new fixed date, like 1942, and the only thing that could change was the time and the day. And so each year there was a slightly different one as the year changed. These are very, very common. You see tons of this. There's an airmail cover by Imperial to England with a really nice corner card from the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. Well, the British saw the value of having advertising in cancels, so creation of slogan cancels, and they did this in Britain, of course, and then they did it in Palestine as well. And so here we have the first one, which was an advertisement for Jaffa oranges by Jaffa oranges. There were two cancels. The upper one is on a Krag machine. The lower one is on a Universal machine. The Krag machine, they had a spelling error where it should be und grapefruit in the German translation here. It was in English and German. They have and instead of und. And then in the Universal, they have English, French, and German. And so this was an early example of using slogan cancels in Palestine. The next one was that's important is keep death off the road. It was used late in the mandate. It was all this exact same cancel, except not with the Arabic and Hebrew, was used in Britain. It was, of course, for traffic safety, but in Palestine it had a double meaning because at this time there was a lot of activity going on with the various groups trying to, the Arabs trying to capture Palestine, the Israelis trying to get a hold of Palestine. So there was a lot of problems on the roads, vehicles being blown up and things like that. So this really had a double meaning. I don't want to get into that because it's a long story. This one here is an interesting cover. This advertised it's a Krag cancel. It has Arabic and Hebrew and English. It advertises the Near East exhibition, which was a big exhibition in Tel Aviv in April of 1929. And what's interesting about this cover is that it's used as an arrival cancel on a LZ 127. That is a Zeppelin cover from the Orient flight. Zeppelin took place in 1929 from late March of 1929, March 25th or so. Now there was supposed to be a drop of mail in Jerusalem, but when the Zeppelin got to Jerusalem, it was dark and they couldn't drop the mail. They dropped it the next morning when it got light in Tel Aviv, and the bag was actually lost. And then somebody found it, luckily, recovered the bag. Although it was found in Tel Aviv, they still sent it to Jerusalem, and it got a Jerusalem arrival cancel, even though it actually was dropped in Tel Aviv. So it's this is a very well studied Orient flight that went from Friedrichshafen stopped in, had drops in Athens and Cairo and places like that. So a lot of postal history associated with this LZ-127 flight. Here's another couple of inches. This is the slogan for the 11th Fair, which has this flying camel, which was the symbol of the 11th Fair in the 1932 fair. And what's interesting here is the cover on the left has this cancel as an arrival cancel, but it has the date error. And you can see here with the little red symbol, this is the correct date on this cover on the right. This was not thought to ever been used. And I found this in a dealer stock many years ago, and it's the only known example of this, which thought was a proof, maybe a test cancel, but it was actually used on live mail. And this is a cover that has that cancel. Kind of an interesting find. So things are out there to be found. This is the Purely Arab Fair of 1934. It's got an Arab and English only. It's a crag cancel. And it's interesting because they're very, very rare. I thought there were only one or two examples of this cancel. Because at the same time, we had the 11th Fair. So most of the mail received the 11th Fair cancel, and a very, very little mail received the Purely Arab Fair cancel. But again, with eBay, over the last few years, two other examples have shown up, again, addressed with the same typewriter, with the same cachet, presumably made by the same person. So we now know maybe four or five of these in existence. So kind of interesting that things do turn up on eBay. These are the later Arab fairs, 1934, 1936. You see the flying camel. These are not that rare, but they can be found. But this one is interesting, the cover on the left, to me, because some of you may remember the F.E. Eaton Company in Vancouver, which used to hold auctions in the 1970s. Well, 1974, I bought a lot of Palestine covers from them, and this cover was in there. And this got me interested in collecting Jerusalem postal history. So I've been collecting it since for exactly 50 years. And it's still in my exhibit. And it's not that rare, but it means something to me. Here's now we're going to turn now to registered mail very briefly. I don't want to take too much time, but before they had registered cancels, they simply used a single circle cancel. It was a rather unique 26 millimeter, 30 millimeter cancel. It again, you have the registration cachet or etiquette on here. It was going to Germany. It was censored in Germany to make sure there wasn't money in it, because this was the inflation period in Germany, and so it was opened and checked. It's this usage of this single circle cancel is fairly rare. Not very many examples have been found. And so the real first cancel is this Jerusalem with RGD at the bottom. So it's a skeleton cancel, which they add the letters RGD to indicate registered. It's a registered cover to the United States. It's again correctly franked, and it was going to Oakland. And this cancel is fairly rare. It's not as rare as some people think, but it's not common, that's for sure. Again, with the register, there are many different hammers used over the years. So again, you need these overlays so you don't have to measure the width and height and type of font and stuff. You can just overlay and see which cancel you have on your cover. Most of them are pretty common. This is just another couple of examples of registered covers and insured cover. I'm going to skip over some of this. This is an interesting cover. So what happened in 1941, when this cover was sent, 31st of October, the route from Palestine to Europe, to the United States, was closed because you couldn't get over Europe because of the First World War. And so the British developed a route which went eastward to Karachi and Hong Kong, and then Manila and Singapore, and it joined up with the Pan Am Clipper coming every couple of weeks, and then so it either joined it in Hong Kong or Manila, picked up the mail, carried it across the Pacific, and then it received a San Francisco arrival cancel, and then it would be flown across the United States. But this route ended on December 7, 1941, when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and so this route was also closed. And so this cover was sent on the 31st of October. It was censored in Palestine, airmailed, and it didn't reach Honolulu until November 25th. That's a month. And because the Pan Am flight was every 2 weeks, it must have missed one, and it had to wait a while. So it ended up being on just about the last flight before the route was closed because of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. So it arrived ended up arriving in New York on I think November 25th. So and then in East Orange, New Jersey, on December 1st. So it took quite a while, just about 2 months or more, a month rather. Sorry, to get across during the Second World War. An interesting example of this route. This is another very interesting cover. It's a registered Jerusalem cover. It's got it here via Zeppelin. So it was sent. Again, I've written an article on this, so I don't want to go into too much detail because it's such an interesting cover. But what turned out was that it missed the Zeppelin flight, and so it was sent to Stuttgart, and then it caught a Deutsche Lufthansa flight, and which went to across went to Las Palmas and the Canary Islands. It went to Seville, Spain, and then Las Palmas, and then Bathurst and Gambia in Africa, and then was flown on the ship called the Schwabenland. And then, in order to speed up mail, the German Lufthansa had developed a type of mail that we call catapult mail, and so the ship had a plane on it, which was catapulted off the plane, went to Brazil, and then this letter ends up in Brazil. So what's interesting about it is that because it went on the catapult mail, it's one of only 3 known covers from Palestine that went on catapult mail. So had it gone on the Zeppelin, it would have been rare, but nowhere near as rare as it ended up, because it missed the Zeppelin flight and ended up taking this catapult across the Atlantic on the Schwabenland and then across to Brazil. An interesting cover. Here's another Jerusalem registered cover. Something was filed out. You can see here Jerusalem is offset, and there's something to the right of Jerusalem. I don't know what it is. Nobody's ever figured out what it is, but it's an enigma of a Jerusalem cancel. Not used very often. Only a few examples of it. There's a special cancel for express mail, a double circle cancel, like you can see here. Again, and then we come to parcel. There were a lot of parcel post cancels. The very first ones, like the British system, just had PP, parcel post, and this is an example of it. It's a fairly scarce cancel. And then we come to this lower one here, which is only on a receipt. It's a large 36 millimeter cancel. It's the only known example of this cancel. And then we have here a typical parcel post cancel on the back of a parcel receipt with a bunch of postage due stamps to pay the tax on sending a parcel receiving. There's other examples here. You can see the Jerusalem parcel post, and here it's parcel post Jerusalem. So we have these variations in a number of cancels that were used by the post office in Jerusalem. In the parcel depot, they had another cancel for receipts, and there were actually a couple of different examples of a depot cancel for a receipt for a parcel received at the depot or taken from the depot. Now we come to postage paid cancels. Now, what happened was when the British released the typograph stamps in July 1920, to replace the lithograph stamps, there was a run on the post office. Collectors and dealers and speculators purchased the low-value stamps. And very quickly, they ran out of stamps. And so what they had to do, because they had to wait for more stamps to come from Britain, they made these red Jerusalem paid cancels. And unfortunately, they used a red ink that's fading over time. And on most covers, the only way you can distinguish it is by the impression the hammer made on the envelope. It's here on this cover. This is a cancel with no value indicated. Here's another one in which it was the cancels here, a little hard to see, in which there was a 1 added to pay 1 mil rate for printed matter. And they very quickly came out with some other ones in which they had the value 3 mils. Here it's an inverted 3, 5 mil. So again, they're always in red to indicate that postage was paid. And again, they're very, very hard to see because of the red ink they used, which is fading with time. Here's another example of one with 3 mil, different ways, different spacing, different widths and so forth of these cancels. This one used quite a bit later, 1923. Later on, they still used these, for mail that was basically second class type mail. And so here's an example with this Jerusalem postage paid cancel in 1925. Here's an example, 1927. Very, very unusual. And this cover on the left is that the postage paid cancel is in black ink instead of red, and the British were usually very strict about these things. So unusual to find this sort of error. And it had the JSM triangle at the time, again, locally going to Jerusalem. Now you see these cancels with the bridge, Jerusalem, Palestine, postage paid with various values, 2 with the M for millim or without the M. This time it wasn't million, it was actually mils. They changed the currency. But sometimes with and without the M. You see these, a lot of them on these Red Cross postage scheme covers used during the Second World War for mail to the occupied countries. And these aren't that scarce, but you'll see them on auctions and eBay, often for like hundreds of dollars when they should only be worth tens. So be careful if you're buying one. They're not that rare. This is rare. This is the machine cancel, the Krag machine cancel, again in red, very unusual, used in black. The assumption here is they put the wrong data hub in to the Krag machine. They used a postage paid instead of the regular one. This is the only known example in black, and this one in red. There's 2 or 3 examples known of this machine cancel. Junk mail, people just didn't keep them, unfortunately. Sad. Here's a couple more where they have the Krag machine cancel. This time says Palestine postage paid, 3 mils. Here's one which they took the word Palestine out, 2 mils. Again, very, very rare machine cancels. Don't see them very often. This one here, again, probably unique. It's a square postage paid cancel. The only one I've seen, it's a universal, as opposed to Krag and the others, and 3 mil square cancel. Now we come to the return letter office. Mail to the return letter office is incredibly interesting. And again, I've written quite a large article on this cover. It's actually one of my favorite covers. It was sent from Jerusalem during the civil administration. Let me get my notes so I get the dates right. It's paid with it's 2 piastre, 1 piastre registration, 1 piastre and 2 5 mil typograph stamps for postage. It was sent from Mea Shearim Jerusalem 1 office. So it's got a very rare dispatch cancel from because the first office, sub office opened in Jerusalem. They just put a 1 on Jerusalem. They said Jerusalem 1. Very quickly replaced it with a Mayo Sharim council, which we'll see later. But very rare council. Was sent to Shanghai. So it was transferred from the British postal system to the Chinese postal system. And we see the cachet here for the transfer to the CPO. They couldn't deliver it. The recipient was unknown. And it sat in the Shanghai office for a year. And then it was finally returned to Palestine. We got all the markings here for the return via Port Said to Jerusalem. It gets back to Jerusalem, and it's get my notes here, get the dates right. Here it is. Okay. So now the Jerusalem is no longer the civil administration. It's now the it's not, sorry, it's now the civil administration, but it had left the military, now the civil administration, and it was canceled with this Jerusalem RLO, Return Letter Office Council. And that turns out to also be an extremely rare council. So on this cover, we have Jerusalem 1, extremely rare, goes all the way to Shanghai, comes all the way back, gets a Jerusalem RLO council, another super rare council. And it never was delivered. They couldn't find the person who sent it because it had no return address. So the only reason it survived is because the British sold these RLO covers to stamp dealers, and that's why it survives. An incredibly interesting cover, I think one of my favorites, and survived because the recipient was never found. Here's another one. It's a Jerusalem RLO, a different hammer. It followed an American throughout the Middle East, and because of all the different councils, you can follow it to Beirut, Lebanon, to Istanbul, Turkey, dead letter office in Baghdad, and then it ends up coming back to Jerusalem and the return letter office. So again, following all these councils, you can really see how this cover traveled through the Middle East in 1936. Super interesting, these RLO councils. Okay, so now we come to Mea Shearim. This was the first sub-office. This is one of the early councils. This is a cover going to Manischewitz in Cincinnati. Interesting fellow in his own right, but that's a whole other story. And it's got this Jerusalem 1, the little one there. It's for a very, very short time in 1920, January to March, I believe it is. And then here's the first council. They had Mayo Sheorim. You see the spelling with the O's here. This was the Ashkenazi spelling of Mayo Sheorim. This is a very Orthodox Jewish community in Jerusalem, and in JSLM for Jerusalem here. Used for a very short time. And then they changed the spelling from Mayo Sheorim to the Sephardic spelling, Mea Shearim, with the O's replaced by A's. And here's the Mea Shearim cover going to Germany. Here's a postcard going to Beirut, again, Beirut, Syria at the time. So interesting. Then here's an engraved hammer that they got from Britain, the double circle with Mea Shearim in Jerusalem. Then there's also this engraved single circle council that was used there. These can be found. This is another example of different hammer on a very rare postal money order. What it's used on is quite rare. And here's an unusual double circle Mea Shearim council, mainly used on receipts, not on mail. Now, the next office that opened was Citadel. This is in the old city near the Tower of David, and this was Jerusalem 10. Now, they didn't have any Jerusalem 10 etiquettes, so they just simply used the Mea Shearim Jerusalem 1 and added the O. Now, I see I'm running out of time, so let me just go. This is the double circle Citadel Council, and then the Greek colony is another sub-office in Jerusalem, very rare council, this skeleton, and then the double circle is a little bit less rare, but still not common. Mahane Yehuda, which was the next office they opened, again, you have the skeleton and the double circle. Another very interesting cover going by the horseshoe route during World War II to the United States. Rahavia, another sub-office, and again, a very unusual double circle cancel. This is a skeleton double circle, and each time they cleaned and reassembled it, they put the type in a different place. And these covers are all rare, but I really look for them and use two examples of different spacings of the text in the outer ring. And they're every time I find one, I get really excited. Talavera Barracks. This is believed to be the rarest. It was only opened in 1936 for a very short time during the Arab disturbances in Palestine in 1936, and then used mainly by military personnel. And I'm not going to have time to go on to all the other offices because I want to leave time for questions. So there's a whole other section on what, because the GPO, General Post Office in Palestine, controlled every form of communication, whether it be telegrams, whether it be banking, whether it be your radio license, whether it be your car license, telephone. All these things were controlled, and they had cancels for receipts for all these different services. Okay, I'm going to stop there and ask for questions because I'm going to run out of time. Anybody have any questions?
Well, if folks have questions, I'd encourage you to contact Joel directly and ask them outside of this recording, outside of this session, because we have run out of time and we need to get ready for the next one. So I would like to say thank you so much, Joel, for sharing all of this fantastic information with us. And I want to thank everyone for joining us for the session as well.
Thanks so much, Joel.
Thanks.
Yes. So thank you everyone for coming, and we will see you in the next session.